Well, this week, I think I'll have a piece that you all know. This is Clair de Lune by Debussy. I always kind of decide at the last minute which piece feels right, and this one does. We've actually had a rather full moon lately, too. It's a special piece because it was he first had done a song, Clair de Lune, by a poem by Paul Verlaine back in 1882. And whether this was inspired by that or not, isn't entirely known. But he did this later, and it wasn't published. Well, first in 1890, and then Suite Bergamasque was published later in the 1900s as part of a set. And Bergamasque and Clair de Lune have certain etymologic similarities in terms of the source of it. It's interesting. People have a very particular way of playing it. You'll often have which is completely wrong. Because he's written it in 9/8. If you can see this. And what this means in 9/8 is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It gives it a completely different trajectory, or gestalt, as you were. And it actually suspends time in a much more interesting way. Everybody loves to personify these pieces that are ubiquitous, pieces that everybody knows, But it's actually... Then we can properly listen to how the note decays and then blend it with the note of the next phrase. It's interesting, too, how he has these thirds. And what do we really make of that? We've got 5 flats in the key signature, but those look on the face of it to be F minor triads. Of course, in the end of the first measure, he gives it to us. We have D flat, F, A flat, which is a D flat major triad. So we're in the key of D flat major. But he also has some surprises as we go along. So as we wend our way down, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And he blends it. This F is tied over as he then moves on. E flat is tied over. He wants this overlap of sound tied over. Now this is an interesting chord. Different kind of a sound, isn't it? Basically, it's G flat major, which in the key of D flat is the 4 chord. But he's added this interesting thing, which if you take by itself is an E flat minor triad. So we kind of have this duality. D flat in first inversion, very D flat, and then back to this. So he's playing with these whole step contrasts. Debussy works a lot with whole steps and half steps. I've mentioned that before. Very often, it's a half step which then expands and which grows, and it's actually rather important where that comes from, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Of course, as we go on after this duality, isn't it interesting? Now we have already a color, a tinge of a bit of something else. And it's this C flat. Which gives it a different 7th quality. And then back which now is really B flat. When we finish it, B flat minor. And then as we go on, E flat, that E flat that we had that was added now becomes the bass note. And the foundation of these harmonies, E flat minor. Again, like a pedal in an organ. I'm intentionally not playing them in time this time. This is classic Debussy parallel chords. We call them planed chords as well. That's what his piano in Brive la Gaillarde did so well. Now, he composed this before he had that piano, but he clearly liked these parallel harmonies, these parallel chords. As we go on, we've had the A flat pedal, which is a fifth away from the E flat. Now look what he does. A, we've gone up a half step. Remember, the half steps are very important. B flat, C, D flat, E flat now, the F flat, and then this dominant seventh, which is the dominant seventh of D flat, our key. So it's very appropriate. Oops, sorry. It's interesting, you know, we started with these thirds that then filled out. Now here we start with the same third, then we go to a sixth, sorry, and then when we go on, sixth, fifth, third, it sounds like a horn call out of Beethoven, or from the Les Adieux Sonata of Beethoven as well. So there are various images, you know, various references, I would say, going on with this. The loneliness of the single note as he evolves. And then as we go on, now we have a bit of a kaleidoscopic intensification chromatically. Back to the D flat. Now it's interesting how he develops this. Instead of simply having this 6 beat structure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that we have, get it into the light. He adds on top of it. We have D, da 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 D, da 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 da, so that it gets more intense as we go on. He adds on to the beats, and that's of course leads us higher to another sort of climactic area. We hear this G sharp, F sharp, E sharp, E, D sharp, C sharp. He's playing with this chromaticism, this intensity as we go down the scale. Then we have thirds. Twice, because it's Debussy and the phrases are classically conceived. Interesting sound, isn't it? Sort of a half diminished seventh is what's kind of implied, but it's incomplete. You know, we have sort of a fifth with an added sixth. He wants this ambiguity. It's the same as that ambiguity we had with the B flat chord with the E flat before. So then we go on with this, again, the A flat, E flat is back, this pedal notion. And in this one, it adds he plays this E flat chord, but then he adds this D flat, which a lot of the editions don't do, but it makes a lot of sense because it's that whole step that we had before. You know, he's working with the half step expansion, in some cases the whole step going back down as well. So that's a very unique moment that we don't hear in every edition. I like these Barenreiter editions for that reason, because they do a lot of research with the sources and give us things we don't always find. So just to hear that, we go there and then we go on. And then on. Twice again. I think of a kaleidoscope here, of these colors, these changing, these subtly, we keep those fundamental things, but then we go to the C, then the B flat, and then the A, and then the, so we have, one more time to really get that. Magical return. But this is a very interesting spot. First we have F minor. We're supposed to be in the key of D flat, but we have F minor. But it's magical. He's flipped it on its side. We have then he goes to what seems like the major. We go from here, minor to major, but then he adds the E flat. So it becomes a seventh, which makes it even more special. And then he goes back to the A flat, which is a different seventh, a half diminished seventh. Then to the E flat dominant. It's interesting because, well, we'll go on one more. This A natural, we have D, we have the B flat to the A. This is a big moment. We have this half step descent. He saved it until now. And then we go on. A flat, D flat. Then we're back where we're supposed to be. But it's interesting. Debussy, this chromaticism, I have kind of a theory about this. When he was 18, he was a hired musician for Madame von Meck, who was a patron of Tchaikovsky. And so he traveled all over Europe with her and her children. He was teaching the daughters how to play the piano, and he'd improvise and he'd perform, you know, chamber music and various things. And at one point they got to go to Bayreuth and see Wagner. And, you know, Wagner, there was at one point we had that half diminished. These seventh chords, you know, Wagner often had these third related harmonies that sounded kind of like this. And at Bayreuth, Debussy heard Tristan und Isolde, which is really one of Wagner's most important operas. And there's this passage, the Tristan passage, the Tristan chord. You see how chromatic that is. What's interesting, it starts with the sixth. Remember in Clair de Lune, we had the sixth later? But what's important, that descending half-step line. Debussy has this descending half-step line everywhere. And then later, and of course it goes to these tritones, and then we go outwards. So Debussy had quite a reckoning with Wagner, and in fact later denounced what he did. He didn't like what Wagner did with the chromaticism. But I think, when in the 1890s, when he was working on Clair de Lune, it wasn't that long after he would have heard Wagner. And so I think that this is a factor in Clair de Lune and some of this whole step and this half-step activity. And so I just wanted to point that out. That, Wagner was a very important composer for many composers that came after that. But I think for Debussy, it's something that he struggled with his whole life, and indeed, it influenced his use of the half-step, whole-step language. So I think I'll close. This is a recording I made some years ago on my Steinway. For a while, it had more than 700,000 hits on YouTube until someone claimed that they had made the recording, or someone else had made the recording. But I know I made it on my Steinway. So I think this came out pretty well, though. So this is Clair de Lune played on the Steinway.